I never thought I'd say these words on camera, but here we are. Let's talk about sex. Our guest is the world's top authority on the open marriage between technology and our sex lives. And she's here today to give us a glimpse into the future of sex. Please welcome to the South by Southwest studio, Bryony from Melbourne.
Very nice.
How was my pronunciation?
Perfect.
Did I
spot
flan
on.
the R?
It's like you've been to Melbourne before or something.
I've been to Melbourne before or something. From Melbourne to the world's leading authority on Sextech, the future of sex.
Yeah.
Yet, I love a good origin story.
Okay.
It didn't start off with Sextech. It didn't start off with the podcast. You were in, I read, a boring corporate job.
Yeah. I was stuck hitting my head against a metaphoric wall. Yeah, I was just working in tech and thought, I got to one of those stages where I think most people do mid-career and went, is this it? Like, is this what we're doing? And I thought, oh, maybe I'll do something completely different and be a sex therapist.
Totally normal train of thought. I thought about that as well. I woke up today.
My two passions, and then realised it's going to take me 10 years to be a qualified sex therapist. But you know what? I've got this experience in tech. Let me put in sex, tech, Googled it, and not much came up.
Wow. And how many years ago was this?
This was in 2016.
Not that long ago.
Yeah. I mean, there were robots that came up, but not that much. And that's where the podcast started. I thought, let's see what's going on with technology and our sex lives and sexuality, more than just sex. What's going on with everything to do with sexuality and how it's impacted by technology, and how's technology influencing our intimate lives. That's where it began.
So for most folks, they talk about the ennui of corporate the boredom of corporate boardrooms, right?
Yeah.
And midlife crises or early life crises, and
30-year-old
yeah,
life crisis,
corporations, and I want to do something different, but it's rarely followed by. And my other passion, by the way, is sex therapy.
Yeah.
Where did that develop?
I don't know. I think it is. Maybe it is common. I feel like everyone comes to Sextech with a story, right? You never work in this field unless there's something good or bad that's happened. But I feel mine was a pretty average story in that I grew up in Melbourne, in Australia, and had a pretty average sex education. Like most people, it was an anatomy lesson, a documentary on how animals mate, and then good luck, don't have sex till you're married. And so I think...
So I think your parents and my parents
they were
corresponded.
Obviously, writing letters at that point. It was that long ago. But yeah, it was a very average experience. But that for me was a catalyst through, university, professional life, in terms of going, well, what else? Can we speak up? Can I learn some more about relationships? I felt like I had no clue. And I think most people feel like they have no clue about sex and no clue about relationships. So I'd always had that, I guess, in my back pocket and thought.
And that's universal, right? Because you're saying you had that experience in Melbourne, and I was joking, I'm born and raised in the Bay Area to Pakistani immigrant parents. My parents were rare and they were more open and had the sex talk, but I have so many friends.
Yeah.
I'm older than you, in their 40s, who literally have said they're married with kids. My parents never, forget sex, never even talked to us about girls.
Yeah.
And I wish I could have that conversation. Yeah. And then we had the miracle of life, and then said, okay, hair is growing in new places. That's a girl. Don't have sex until you're married.
Here's the book.
Yeah, or the flips. Yeah.
Yeah.
And or the flip to that, right? And then you get to 30. How come you're not married?
Yeah.
And you're like, you never taught me anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're like, how could I get to 60 if I don't even know how to turn the ignition?
Yeah. True.
Literally and figuratively for some folks. And now you have the podcast, Future of Sex, and you have listeners from all around the world. What's the most common, if you will, angst that they have, or just...
Yeah, well, I thought we'd be talking about sex tech, especially on the future of sex, but actually the most downloaded episode is about how do I communicate to my partner. And it's about sexual fantasies. And really nothing to do with technology. And in fact, I think the future of sex has nothing to do with technology and everything to do with humanity and being, as you said, more open, get rid of this shame, whether it's, talking to your partner, having that conversation with your parents. You're a parent.
I am.
How do you have that conversation with your kids?
Well, you're asking me now, all right. So I've talked to my wife about this, and what we've tried to do is model openness. Because I remember, growing up in the Bay, my parents, immigrant parents, traditional in many ways, but my dad did something different. He sat me down at the age of 12 in the kitchen and said, "Beta, son, we have to talk about something." I'm like, oh my God, am I in trouble? He said, "Beta, there's something called nocturnal emissions. And I'm like, I need to leave immediately for them. My dad's like, sit down, I must tell you. And at that I was cringing and I was crying, but in hindsight, I'm like, the fact that my father and mother broached that, at that moment, it created unconsciously an opening where I could go to them and talk to them about everything else.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm glad you mentioned that, because you think, oh, the future of tech, why should we talk about these other issues? But the tech should, in my opinion, augment, supplement, expand this.
I'm with you. I think technology is the great amplifier in place of us not having that sex education at school or intimacy education. I mean, when we're talking about sex, we're also, as you say, talking about relationships and marriage and intimacy, the whole bucket, right? So I think if we can't have those conversations, at least we can be a safe place, and we can use technology to augment, whether that is going into a VR space and learning about STIs from someone and having that conversation about herpes with someone in a VR space, because it offers that privacy and anonymity, but is also really immersive and feels kind of safe. To using an app to learn. We have these sex bots in America. I don't know if you've heard about these.
I do. I am a very happily married father of 3. I do not know about sex bots yet.
Okay, well, maybe
now
someone wants to learn how to sex better. I don't know, it could be someone in the fam. But they have apps that help you learn to sext better. Of course, we never learned how to sext, and so there's...
To sext better?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. There's also bots to learn, how to, ask your partner to communicate sexual fantasies. But yeah, you can practice with a bot, because most people's sexting game is pretty weak. So have a practice with a bot. So there's all these sorts of things which, I think people always go, well, isn't it going to replace us? Like,
that was it. That was the concern. Like, why am I asking? Well, here's this. Yeah. Why should I ask AI, a bot, to teach me a human being about sex?
It's a really good question. And I think it's because there's still so much stigma and taboo wrapped around this. It's really hard for us to have these conversations. And so sometimes technology is a great sort of side piece to be able to learn from. It's like books, to be able to have those experiences. Now, it doesn't always mean you're having a conversation with technology. You could be using a platform that shows you different things, that shows you, this is an interactive experience of anatomy, or this is what it's like to pleasure a woman. OMG, yes, is a good example of that. I mean, there's so many different examples, but I think you're absolutely right. Technology shouldn't be replacing us in terms of having these conversations about sex or even having, sexual experiences. It should augment it and help us understand ourselves.
But, as an old head, see these gray hairs?
Right.
No, I don't see it. But many of my friends, right, and we'll keep it personal, my friends whose parents did not talk to them about this, they had to go online to learn how to please a woman.
Yes.
And there's also a shame here.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about how sex tech and sexual education vis-a-vis the growth of technology, can it reduce the shame of even asking questions?
Well, yeah, we're here talking about it right now. So you know what? I think
this is progress.
Sex tech is the Trojan horse in terms of adding tech on the end. Of course, it's an entire industry, but adding tech on the end, suddenly it becomes a lot easier to have this conversation and to talk about it because, we're talking about technology. Well, what are we really talking about? We're really talking about the human experience and sexuality and sure, maybe using an app or website in between. But so I just think even the word sex tech is a great starter for conversations between thousands of people and at the dinner table. So that's really good. I forgot the question about sex education that followed that.
Well, no, you actually answer is that it's a means to allow sexual education, especially as in America, there are books that are being banned.
Yeah.
Sex education's being banned. And you mentioned sexuality. As we're learning more, thanks to globalization and new voices and new experiences, sexuality, the spectrum, these stories that have always existed, there's a ban on sexuality as well.
Yeah.
And so the education aspect of it when it comes to sexuality, how is sex tech going to help us understand the spectrum and diversity of how so many of us experience sexuality and sex?
Oh my gosh, there's so many great examples of this, I think, that, I just don't think it's, as I'm sure you agree, up to governments to decide what to do with our bodies or our sexuality or our choices. This is such a deeply personal experience for everyone. It's like a fingerprint. We're all so different and we all change over the course of our lives in terms of what we want. And I just look at some of the tech and I go, this is so fantastical and cool, but coming back to the VR one again, but being able to, put on a headset and swap genders and have an experience, an immersive experience of, well, what does that really feel like if I look down and suddenly I'm a different gender? And having those experiences through technology, I think, can be really powerful in shifting people's minds.
Can I ask you, doing the research on this, does it increase empathy or not?
Oh, I couldn't say from a research perspective.
But from what you listen to people, when they go through the VR experience,
yes.
Does it engender empathy or revulsion? Does it make people more open or more closed and scared?
Well, I mean, to answer that question, I say people that are leaning towards doing these experiences, they're probably more open anyway. So we're really at the ground floor of trying these sex and tech combinations. So they're probably, I think, primed to be more open to experience that. We haven't seen it, like we have in schools where we have science and history taught through VR lessons, which is really cool, and we can do that with sex education in the future. But it's, I don't want to, go down the wrong path. I haven't seen that yet because we're not
it's so new.
strapping people down and saying you better swap
Orange.
genders immediately.
Put in the Visine.
Yeah, let's do this. So, but I think what you see is really interesting because it's more just like unless you get sick through the use of those extreme technologies in terms of physically ill, it's just an experience that brings you deeper into yourself and knowing yourself. And I think that's where we kind of stopped at the start anyways. Like, well, before we worry about, teenage girls going and having sex with, their partners or whatever, what about sex with themselves? Or what about understanding their own bodies and boys as well? And everyone, and starting from there. And so I think that's really interesting, and that's an interesting conversation. And then from there it goes right out, right? Like, what would it look like to have sex with the universe? Like
what would it look like to?
How would it feel? What would it smell like?
A disappointment. Sex with the universe should have been better.
Never again.
But speaking about the dark side, speaking about some of the concerns, right? So we're seeing sex tech in places like Japan, where I'm sure you've done the research, and women are like, all right, we don't need men, we're doing great, and then there's this generation of men. Don't you want relationships? Don't you want to have sex? And you've seen the data where a young generation of men are just playing video games.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, I don't. That's okay. I have VR.
Yeah.
I have a doll.
Yeah, Gatebox.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with the hologram girlfriend.
There you go.
Yeah.
And so the fear is, why? If we're curating our photos, if we're curating our facts, if we're curating our news to make us feel comfortable, shouldn't I just curate my perfect girlfriend? Why go out in the real world when I can create weird science like a hologram?
Oh, but you don't want that because that's...
But that's happening in Japan in a way.
Yes,
in a way.
Okay, for sure, in a way. But I think that there's other factors at play there culturally that lack maybe the creativity or the spontaneity, the special parts of relationships that we have here. But Gatebox is such an interesting one for me because I think it's so specific and so local. I don't think it would
Can you explain it to the audience?
Do I have to look down the camera?
No. You can just look at me if you want.
Well, I just think if I think about the really interesting technologies, they're mostly logical algorithm making sense of things, and humans are wired for their right brain, their creativity, imagination, sense of mystery, spontaneity. All those things come from other humans. And so for me, in talking to people here, and I haven't been to Japan, so I can't really speak on that other than the research.
And I mean, it's a phenomenon for some, but we've talked about it, not to stereotype, but this is what's happening. The youth is just disconnecting.
Yes, and they call those men herbivores, I think, that no longer want to date and have married the hologram Gatebox and get a birthday off, and if you work for Gatebox, you also get some money to buy her a cake or a new outfit or something. But I feel like for me right now, that's too far of a stretch of that would be here in terms of the way we use technology here to connect. But I don't have like
But some of the positives of sex tech, in the future of sex tech, is you're saying that sex tech can actually help reduce crimes and harassment and abuse, which the targets of this abuse overwhelmingly are women.
Yeah, well, I mean, starting in the US, which is where I'm most focused, assault reporting on campus is such a it's such a mixed bag at the moment. I mean, we could improve that so much. And that is, I think, where technology is much better than talking to a human that
Can you
might
give me an
have bias.
example?
Just reporting an assault on campus instead of going through a human and having to talk to them about it, and they may
And
have
oftentimes
bias.
women are not believed, as we know.
Yeah, I actually had this experience in my own university, so I'm quite passionate about it. And having a form and having that be anonymous until enough people report the same person, then it matches up. And so you can see the overlay without, I guess, exposing yourself too much as someone that's gone through that assault experience. So
I'm sorry that you went through that.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, it's probably added to why I'm in Sextech unknowingly. These sorts of things add up.
And you know, you mentioned that, and I don't want to bring up you know, bad memories, but so many people, so many women, unfortunately, so many women who've gone through that. They said the shame. If I speak up, I'll become the target. People won't believe me.
Yes, absolutely. And the person on the other side who was filling out my form did not want me to speak up too. So the shame of just even having the courage to speak up and feeling silenced is enough to keep you quiet for another 15 years.
And I think that's important for people to know that this is, if technology is used with the right intentions,
Yeah.
it can actually bring us together, make us better.
Yeah, and I think you're right in pointing out the challenges before, you know, with Gatebox or this fear of, is it going to replace us? Because I think always with technology and with Sextech, of course, there's always the potential for it to go both ways, right? This dystopian, we're all going to marry holograms.
No disrespect
world.
to holograms. It's a safe space for holograms.
You know, or sex in more, I would say the current uptake here is like sex dolls, right?
Yeah.
And it's similar, kind of, you can see the...
Which is already here.
Which is already here, and which, when I look into that, it's more around, it's a smaller subset of the population, which is why.
But you know, Bryony, you're thinking about the future of sex, and I think what becomes normalized, we don't realize was normal 10 years ago. I'll give you an example.
Oh, yeah.
I'm married. My wife and I have never swiped. I married
You were gonna say
right
this.
before swiping.
Yeah.
Okay, so my friends tell me swiping positive stories and horror stories.
Yeah.
And you know, I've heard of both, and all people say, oh, this will empower women.
Yeah.
And then women are like, this
It
sucks.
so bad.
We just get jerky guys who won't even buy us dinner. They're like, oh, so want to have sex now? You know, like, can you at least buy me a drink? And they're like, it's
And vice versa, I'm
yeah,
sure.
yeah. Can you just like talk to me? Can you look me in the eyes for a second? And I'm like, I pray for you. And I'd go to my wife. I'm like, we're never divorcing ever. I'm with you
never
till
be
the
on
end.
the apps.
I'm with you till the end. But you know, we're seeing it right now. This is it. This is like
Yeah.
the future of sex is now with swiping.
Yes, absolutely. And 10 years ago, we probably thought that was weird too, you know, when that was entering, everyone's like,
But
well,
kids
I'm not
nowadays
going
are
on a
like, what are you
dating app.
talking about?
And now, if you're single and you're not on a dating app, I'm sorry, you're never going to be single because you have to be on the apps, you know. But I think it's interesting. It always has the potential to go each way. We're going to marry our technology, or it's going to augment our experience and help us find great partners. And the same is, you know, now in terms of, I look at all the sexual wellness products on the market, right? And
Which
they've
we
been
never had
labelled
growing up.
wellness, and they're sitting next to the beauty creams and the eye creams at Sephora, and you're like, wow, the times have changed. And other people would think that is terrifying and horrifying, and why do I need that to replace me? But that's sort of an outdated idea now. If we use a sex toy in the bedroom, that we're replacing someone else.
And I think that the key thing that you point on as we have the final minute is, at the end of the day, we're people. We need connection. We need warmth.
Yeah.
We need community. We need to be heard. We need to be held. And so you're saying that technology can actually help us overcome the barriers that we have to be open.
Well, I hope so. I mean, what sort of future of sex would you like? It sounds exactly, it's the same thing I would like that you described. Open, warm, empathetic. Now, technology doesn't always have to be involved. I think it's more on us. And then, yeah, sure, how we use the technology.
The future of sex, the guru of the future of sex, the czar.
Never been called a guru
The czar of the future of sex. Bryony, thanks so much
Thank
for
you
joining us.
so
I
much.
appreciate it. And thank you for sharing your story.
Okay, thanks so much.
Bryony's featured panel, The Future of Sex, takes place tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. in the Austin Hilton Salon H. You can learn more about her work on her website, futureofsex.com. You got that website. Well done. First in time is first in right. We'll be back live at 5 this afternoon to chat with actor and comedian Eric Andre. These interviews are also streaming live during the event on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/SXSW. I'm Wajat Ali, and as always, thanks for watching.